Hi, let's talk about delegates and events in .NET. A delegate is a type that is a type-safe way of wrapping a reference to a method and the object instance the method was called on. That is a pretty hard concept to wrap your head around of just that description alone, so let's look at some code. Alright, so here we have a pretty simple application. The main method just instantiates a test runner and then asks it to run all the tests. If we look at what a test runner is, it is just a list of tests that is self-contained, and it just, when we call run all tests, then for each test it will process the test, whatever that means. In this case, we've just written down that we'd like to let the caller of the rest of the test runner class decide what to do in here, meaning when we invoke this from program, that's when we would like to decide what happens here. So how do we best go about doing this? Well, this is where delegates really come in handy. So how I would probably do this is you would somehow feed in a delegate type to the test runner itself. So I could do something like test runner dot, I don't know, test processor equals, yeah, well, so we need to set this. We need to set this, right? Because the thing is, what I want to do is I want to do like something like this. I just want to call write to console here. So we can generate a property for this. So let's go ahead and do that. And it's actually smart enough to realize that, hey, this is an action of string. So action is one of the built-in delegate types of .NET, and it represents a delegate type that has no return value. So in this case, a delegate void. It takes in a string because if we look at what we passed in, write to console here takes in a string as well, right? So now we have this in here. So what we can then do in here in process is we can just check if it's not null and then call it. So that would look something like test processor dot invoke and then the object, which in this case is going to be the string that we want to output. But we don't actually want to output a string. We want to do test. We want to insert test here. So let's change this to test processor action test. And then here we'll just do test, and then we'll do something like, actually it's perfectly fine to do that as well. We could just do maybe var message equals and then message. So if we run this now, what's going to happen is we create a test runner. We then assign write to console to the test processor value, meaning that when the test runner runs all the tests, for each test it will invoke this method. And it does that by calling this test processor dot invoke. The question mark here is to make sure that we don't do anything if this is null. So if we run this, we see that 1 + 1 = 2, that should be true. C# is really good, that should be true, and that learning is bad should be false. So that was the simplest way to do this, right? Is with an action, because so that's a predefined delegate type. But we could make our own delegate type. It's just a little bit more complicated. So you could go up here and do something like public delegate void. You can call it test processor, and it needs to take in a test. So we'll create it like so. And then we can go down here and replace this with test processor. Everything else will actually work the same, right? Because test processor is now, it's a delegate void, just like the one above, just like action test was. This is also delegate void that takes in a test. So it's literally no difference. In fact, since action and func was added to C#, we don't use delegate types a lot. So let's just go back to action test. Another way we could have done this is by using what's called an event. So let's change this up a little bit to use an event instead of a delegate. So we'll remove the test processor so that it looks like this again. And then we have to create an event handler. So we'll go register that probably around here. So this has to be public for someone else to be able to use it. So public event handler, and then we can type in the event args here. In this case, that would be test because we want this to trigger on a test. So public event handler, and then on test processed. Let's call it something like that. That sounds pretty good to me. And then what we need to do is when we go down here, we'll just go on test processed question mark dot invoke test. Sender should be something like this. So the main difference here, like you see that this is very similar, right? This is extremely similar to the delegate. The thing here is that we pass in a sender as well, because all the events need an event needs an event source, which is the sender. Like what is the thing that's triggering this event? In this case, we're saying that it's the test runner itself. So how do we then go to register our method on test processed? Well, we would do something like test runner dot on test processed plus equals write to console. We need to make a change here though, is because we don't take in a sender, so we need to add object sender here. So sender here will actually be the test runner instance we have up here now. But we're just going to safely ignore that for now. And if we run the code, we'll get the exact same output as before. So I personally try to use events more than delegates because you get things like this pretty fairly nice syntax of being like it's quite obvious here what's happening. You're adding a new event handler to this event, and it means that you can add multiple of these. So we could make a new one where we just like we could do something else, right? And then do something else could just be do something else. And we could do something here too. Like in this case, we'll just output the test itself, which won't really do much. But if we then now we have two event handlers registered to one event, and if we run this now, you'll see that it just says contrived example.test. That's like this is the second event being triggered. So that is the main benefit of an event over a delegate. I think that's it for this video. So thank you for watching.